I've always wondered if you could go back in time and just walk up to Paul and say, hey, you know those letters you wrote to specific churches at a specific time? Do you know that we now believe that everything you wrote was actually as if God had took over your hand and wrote it for you? I think he'd like, what a load of bullshit that is. That's not what happened.
Exactly.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast that John and I have lovingly called This Is Not Church, even though the farther down the road we get with this, the more it feels like church. I don't know. There are days and then there are days, right, John?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah. So with you as always, I'm Nat, one of your hosts. My brother John is on the other side of the screen that you can't see. And thank your lucky stars because...
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yes.
Dude,
yeah.
what's going on with that beard, man?
I'm thinking about darkening it. What do you think? Make it all black?
Oh, really?
Or go all gray. It's almost time for Christmas, right? Do like the Santa Claus look?
I think maybe that's a good call. Okay.
The little half moon glasses. Yeah. I think that would
work for you. Yeah. Okay. So, hey, already off the rails because that's how we do. Sure. But, and we are, we're just pleased as punch. Is that a thing people still say?
Well, you do, because you say it a lot. Go back and listen to our episodes. You say it a lot.
Do I really? Oh, shit. We are just happy as a clam at high tide to have our next guest on with us. Her name is Susan Cottrell. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I would, the one time I don't ask beforehand, it'd be like, no, it's Cottrell. No. So we have with us Susan Cottrell. I'm going to read, John's trying not to spit coffee out. Man, we are 1 minute and 19 seconds in and John just about blew coffee out of his nose. Yeah. This is going to be good, man.
Oh, for sure.
Let me read through her bio real quick and then let's just get into what she has to say because I guarantee you it's going to be awesome. So, Susan Cottrell is an international speaker whose TEDx talk has 1.5 million views. John, we don't have 1.5 million anything. I'm super impressed.
Yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain thinking we have 1.5 million of anything.
At 1.5 thousand seconds of
I can't even say we have 1.5 million complaints.
No, we might have those. But anyway. Oh, my goodness. OutSmart magazine called her the Mother of All MamaBears. The Advocate dubbed her our favorite affirming matriarch. She is a prominent voice for the LGBTQ community and their faith parents who has been featured on ABC's 2020, Nightline, and Good Morning America, on NBC News Out, and as a contributor on the Our Bible app. She is a public theologian, and through her nonprofit organization, FreedHearts, Susan expresses her authentic love for the LGBTQ plus community and families. And she sees love as the healing foundation of family, faith, and community. She spent 20 plus years in the Nonaffirming Evangelical Church, has a Master of Arts in Theological Studies, and served as a Vice-President of PFLAG Austin. Her FreedHearts blog and YouTube videos have millions of viewers, and her books, Mom, I'm Gay, Loving Your LGBTQ Child, and Strengthening Your Faith, True Colors, Celebrating the Truth and Beauty of the Real You, Radically Included, The Biblical Case for Radical Love and Inclusion, and Be the Love You Want to See in the World are critically acclaimed. She and her husband, Rob, have been married for 34 years and have 5 children, 2 of whom identify as queer. And welcome to the program, Susan. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, man. If anything in that bio is inaccurate, we're sorry. Hopefully it was pretty up to speed and up to date.
Nope,
sounds like
me.
You have a litany of accomplishments and things that to be proud of. That's amazing. So we feel blessed to have someone of your caliber on the program with us. So thank you for
very much.
Giving us your time. That. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could just kind of maybe take us outside of the bio and maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe the Cliff Notes version of maybe your faith journey over the last little bit and kind of tell us how you arrived where you are.
Yeah. Well, we were in the Evangelical church for 20 years. And then our daughter came out. And we just suddenly knew we would no longer fit in the church again. We would no longer be at home in the church. And, you know, the few women that I told privately about our daughter, because I was having to test out the waters here, said it's a sin and you can't accept it. And I thought, where do you get that? And what does it mean not to accept my daughter? So that just really was the linchpin pulled out of my whole faith experience and set us on this deconstruction journey that I have never looked back from now. It was the best thing that ever happened to us.
Amen.
Yeah. And our other daughter, one of our two other daughters came out like a year later. So, and at that point you say, oh, maybe it is us, but that's just, it's not, it's who they are.
Yeah, for sure.
But finding out from our daughter how much people are just hurt, thrown out of their churches, thrown out of their families, teenagers by their families, it just was mind blowing. And I knew that I needed to do this to reach out and be love to these people. So this journey has just become a joy ride of exploration and discovery and loving people that I never, met. And when I get to know them, I love them all the more.
You ever find it interesting that people who are maybe on the other side of the spectrum from you never speak about their journey like that? Boy, this journey of just disliking people and hating people for, who they are and why they're different. Well, it's just enriched my life so deeply.
Right. Continuing to try to please this unpleasable God. That brings joy to my heart.
Wow. Has brought me so much peace.
Yeah, really.
But when I hear your story and others like you that who have been challenged in the other way to say, listen, let's see how much more expansive this love could be.
Yeah.
Man, they just have, and I wish you could see the video because the joy is written on your face.
Yeah. And what I'm talking about is really good news.
Yeah.
It's really astonishingly good news, which is what gospel means.
Right.
It's not bad news that we pretend is good news.
Amen.
God hates us, but if we really, really try, maybe he'll hate us less.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. That's not in any way good news.
Yeah. Or in some versions of that story, maybe God will put on his Jesus glasses and he'll look through those lenses and see not you and your ugliness, but he'll see Jesus and he'll maybe withdraw his hand over.
What a comfort that is.
Yeah. I read somewhere today on Facebook. It was actually just today. I can't remember. I wish I remember who wrote it, but it might have been, Francois Dutoit, who said something like, that's kind of like kissing your wife and picturing somebody else. And that's exactly what we're thinking that God is doing with us, is saying, man, I'll just look at you, but I won't see you. Let me imagine somebody else. And then what a bonkers thing to have, what a toxic vision of God, right?
Yeah.
So,
And I was visualizing too, what if your husband says to you, I hate you, but you know what? I'm going to stay with you for the sake of the kids. You're like, no, here's your bag. Go. I don't need that. And I will accept you for the sake of Jesus. It's like,
right. Oh, thanks. Don't do me any favors, man.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
My personal pet peeve, and it's funny how the farther you go down deconstruction, have you noticed this? That those little catchphrases and those little sort of glib things that maybe didn't used to bother you, all of a sudden just piss you off. Yeah. And so when somebody says, "Well, God loves you in spite of you," well, what a shitty thing to say. That's I never told my children I love you, even though really at your core you're kind of horrible. But I'm so good that my love can still reach out. And I've said the same thing to my wife. And weirdly enough, she's not, she doesn't feel affirmed by that. I don't know why. She's so sensitive. I mean,
it's so weird.
So you have this experience with your own children. If you don't mind my asking, if it's not too personal, what were your views prior to your own personal experience with your own kids? I know you were part of the non-affirming church, but were you actively non-affirming, or were you just kind of, well, that's the church tradition I was raised in, so didn't really occur?
Small thing. I was not raised in the church, actually, which kind of gave me a different foundation. But we came to it when our kids were little, for community and love and all that, and found it. Our first, church was really good for that. But yes, it's like this tacit agreement you don't realize of being non-affirming. Also, I had a best friend in high school who was gay, a gay guy, and I loved to pieces. And so I didn't have this ick thing about it. But the church, you kind of, at the case then, this was 10, 11 years ago, I didn't ever have a conversation about gay people. They just weren't in the church that we saw. And so, but when she came out, it was like, I just knew this was not going to be okay. And so it was a belief by default.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's when I started to look up the Bible, I said, well, what does it say then? I started to look up the verses. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? They're like 6 little verses that are just violently ripped from their context.
Exactly.
And said to mean something else. And you're like, oh my God. And by the way, did you guys notice there are 300 verses that say to take care of the poor?
Yeah.
But you're going to take these out of context? It was just, I was really angry. Can you tell?
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you.
Yeah. I was angry, and I felt so betrayed. And, we left. We didn't end up even consulting the pastors because I already talked to the women leaders, and that was enough. And I didn't want to cast any more pearls to be trampled. So anyway, and just, boy, the more that I progressed, the more like Jesus I am than I ever was when I was in the church, which is ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Something we hear all the time.
Yeah.
I had to leave the church to become more like Jesus.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So not like the Pharisees. That's what I see the church full of now is Pharisees.
Sadly, the blinders are on, firmly affixed. And it is interesting to me that, so I think similar to you, I don't know that I ever had an issue per se. I guess I would have probably repeated back the line, that I was raised with. I probably would have said something very stupid, like, well, we love the sinner and hate the sin. But I wasn't ever, I wasn't then. I'm still not now. I wasn't hateful towards anybody. And the churches that I attended weren't rabidly anti-gay. But boy,
right, exactly.
You didn't have to dig too deep to find out what they really thought. Just because they didn't talk about it every day didn't mean that they didn't have clear opinions on the matter.
Right. And I'm not sure that's not more insidious in a way or equally insidious.
Yeah.
Because it's like it amounts to microaggressions.
Sure.
That just keep piling on. And with microaggressions, you're like, did that just happen? Was that
right?
Or was that just me? When they're outwardly, vicious, you can say, okay, I'm not sticking around for that. So
where whatever that stupid Baptist church that likes to protest funerals.
Westboro.
Know where they stand at least. Honestly, they to me they're not dangerous at all because most people see them for the absurdity that they are. And in fact, we had the same sort of conversation with Sarah Cunningham last week when we talked to her because I said the same thing. I'm like, I feel like those middle of the road churches are sometimes more dangerous because they can give the false sense that you're safe there.
Exactly.
And you are until you're not.
Right. People put in their heart and their soul and their time and their money and their everything.
Well, and on top of that, and I've been involved in a couple of churches that use this kind of language where they're like, well, of course they can come. Of course they can come to our church.
But they're going to have to change.
It's like, but what exactly do you mean by that? Can they be on the worship team? Well, no. Can they run the nursery? Well, no. Can they run your Sunday school? No. Can they be part of the pastoral team? No. So no, they're not accepted. They're not accepted at all.
Right.
They are another potential check mark of someone that they have changed, right? Converted, saved, whatever word you want to use.
Or you get to pat yourself on the back and say, look how tolerant we are.
Right.
Look how inclusive we are. There's gay people in our church. You sound like the guy who says he's got 2 black friends. Right. Who can't see his own racism because how could that be racist? That guy down the street, my neighbor, he's black and I like him. And they missed the point entirely. I was part of a church for a long time and, I knew several, openly gay or anyway, and they were allowed to serve in very specific ways.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was like, could you serve coffee? Yeah, I think that's okay. Could you help park cars in the parking lot? Yeah, I think that's probably okay. You won't get any gay on anyone that way. But you sure couldn't put them on the stage.
Right.
And so, it was one of those conversations that pushed me eventually out. Because I'm like, I just can't be here.
Yeah, you can sit, but you can sit only in the back of the bus.
Yeah. So I pray and hope, for a time when we see the way that we've treated that community the same way, with the same sort of remorse that we see those other things. Because most people in my generation and younger would look at, separate but equal as just nothing more than an abomination. That's horrifying, to see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a no-brainer for them that this is horrifying. Mm-hmm. I hope we're moving that direction.
Yeah.
It may be another 20, 30 years before we look at that the same way, and our kids will be like, what the hell were you thinking? Why was this ever even an issue?
Right. Well, and that's a good question, because the rank and file in the churches are not thinking for themselves. They have not been conditioned to think for themselves. They've been conditioned to follow rules.
Very true.
Right.
And follow instructions. And so, in a way, I when we were part of the church, I don't think we really even recognized that we weren't thinking for ourselves. And you just find some amorphic, answer to your discontent that can make you satisfied. Meaning, I had kind of assumed, after I knew churches weren't affirming, that, well, there's something that happened to gay people to make them gay, and that's why. And so we're tolerant and loving while they sort it out, and hopefully can become straight if the damage is not too deep. That's completely wrong now. I know that. But it was my way of reconciling the irreconcilable, like these lovely people, and God doesn't accept them. And so this was, and I think the rank and file does a lot of that plausible explanation for their disparate viewpoint.
Yeah, well, it's just a somewhat feeble attempt to deal with the cognitive dissonance, or just ignore it altogether, right?
Yeah.
And I say that because I did that.
Yes.
For many years, because you either challenge it and potentially blow up your whole life in some ways,
right? Which we did.
Which I did. Eventually, I said, to hell with it. It was the whatever potential fallout from that was way better than continuing in that path. But if people aren't ready, they're not ready. That thing has to happen at their own pace, and it has to happen. I mean, I'm convinced it has to be their idea. Deconstruction can happen to you, but it still has to be something I think that you embrace.
Yeah, and the leadership are the ones who have a stake in keeping it
exactly
the way it is. And so not to recognize that is really ignorance on the part of the congregation, who just doesn't recognize that they're motivated, that the leadership is motivated to keep you in the pews, not questioning.
Yes.
But Jesus didn't get livid at the rank and file. He got livid at the religious leaders who were lying to people, right, and saying they weren't good enough and using God's name to do it. So,
right. Yeah. And what a parallel, right? Don't you see that? Yeah. I see such a stark parallel. It says, okay, what are we doing? We're heaping burdens on people. We're using, our understanding of Scripture to marginalize and define people, and then we're using God's name to do it, to justify what we're doing. Man, blasphemy. So it all sounds like stuff that we ought to be saying, that's horrifying. Don't do it.
Horrifying. And I thought at the beginning that maybe I'd be able to change leadership.
Don Quixote, here we come. We're going to tilt some windmills together.
Yeah, unless I could offer them a paycheck bigger than what they were already getting. There was no way that was going to happen. But I kind of reached around behind them to the people who were being so hurt, and telling them, God loves you. You're perfect the way you are. You don't need to change. The demand to change is not from God. That's from your church community, your family, but it's not from God, and separating that for people. That's really what my life has become now, loving them as they are.
Well, and I feel that there's a couple levels there with church leadership. One is obviously to keep people in line. You use fear, you use separation, you use othering, you do all of that, right, to keep people in line, and you keep butts in seats, keep them giving you money, keeps your paycheck coming in. But I'm going to be kind of brutally honest here, and the other part of it is just absolutely sheer laziness on their part.
Yeah,
to actually we go to school, if you go to high school or college or whatever, there's a point where you have to start questioning what you're being taught and start learning on your own. And seminary, I feel seminary is one of the places that is absolutely discouraged from day one till the end. You are expected to learn whatever your seminary's philosophy, theology is. Do never question that. Never go outside those lines. Never learn on your own. I can't tell you how many pastors I've talked to that's like, I don't read any current books on any theology. Right. Which isn't to say that older books on theology don't have something to teach us. The Desert Fathers, the mystics, all that I believe has some very strong connections for us. But that's the problem. They're not reading that. And they're not reading some contemporary literature or contemporary theology, which is saying, hey, we've gotten this wrong for a really long time. Yeah. We talked a little bit about the clobber passages, right? And you say 6, and most people say there's 7. And I agree with you that one of those 7 absolutely doesn't even belong in the talk of it. Well, first of all, I don't believe any of them are what they say they are. But there's one that is added, right? That
Jude automatically just echoes one of the other ones. So it's it's like a toss-in. Yeah.
Right. And then you can, but where's the academic side of this? Who's actually taking the time within the church to look at these passages, do the research, find out how they have been misrepresented since what were we talking about with Sarah? Was it that document is coming out in 1946?
Yes.
So they don't even take the time to learn that the word homosexual or homosexuality or whatever you want to say doesn't even appear in the Bible until 1946. So this idea that we have all been taught and been raised on and brought up on didn't exist until 1946 in the Bible.
Right. And then the moral majority made it a thing in the 70s and just poured that toxin like the Exxon Valdez oil spill.
Yeah.
And how do you ever clean that up in people's thoughts and psyches? So, it is very lazy. And some seminaries, you really do learn to think. And that was my seminary. But the evangelical ones you're talking about, they're just grooming these men to become, a chip off the old block. And there's no thinking involved. But, and the other thing is that if you want to just sit back and say, okay, how would God want to speak to you? Church, if you get off somewhere or you're never wrong, okay, that's a problem. That's a different problem. But when you are wrong, how would God speak to you? Mm-hmm. Because you're not reading any of the new thinkers that are revealing where we've been wrong. If someone like these pastors do study and say, this we've gotten this wrong, you immediately throw them out as a heretic. Right. So how is God going to speak to you? How will you ever find where you're wrong? Well, you're not interested in finding where you're wrong. I see. Yeah.
And that's what I thought. That's it.
Well, yeah. If you can hold on to the Bible as the end all be all to every answer you ever need. And by the way, the Bible that you read in the way that you read it with the lens that you read it through, disregarding that there are hundreds of thousands of people out there who read a completely different Bible than you and come to completely different conclusions. I mean, you have to live in this really weird little bubble where you're right and everybody else is wrong. And if you were to look at it from a perspective, you're in a minority too. You're very much in a minority of what you believe in and you're holding on to as truth compared to the rest of this world.
Yeah, but John, you're forgetting something. You're forgetting something. Americans are hella narcissistic.
Well, yeah.
Come on, man.
I'm sorry.
But come on, man. We know the rest of the world follows our lead on this stuff. Yeah, that was tongue firmly planted in cheek. I was going to draw a little distinction. I think you might too as well, Susan, between like a for real seminary and these fly-by-night little diploma mill theology or like Bible schools where they really do focus on indoctrination more than my friends who've gone to actual seminary, man, they come out thinkers. I mean, I would say, Douglas Campbell, who's a professor of divinity, professor at Duke's Divinity School. he's going to challenge your thought processes, and he's not going to.
Yeah, but it's not just like these fly-by-night or whatever you call them, little pop-ups that are producing non-thinking, but people like DTS, in the Dallas Theological Seminary, that is really
Liberty or
the status quo. Liberty is incredibly well founded and funded, and they're teaching heresy, like horrible, hatred. They're teaching contempt.
It's interesting. My associate pastor is my good friend Todd Mullen. Todd, you're on the show. I'll put you on the show, Todd. Todd Mullen. He actually got his master's degree through Liberty. And then afterwards, like in the middle of getting his master's degree, or actually I think in the middle of getting his first degree through Liberty, he starts this deconstruction process. And he's like, well, I'm invested. I'm going to finish my degree. But he did the rest of it through gritted teeth, man.
Yeah.
And then just decided to be the fly in the ointment for every discussion on every, like those discussion boards they would have. And he was the guy, talking about Karl Barth. He's the guy talking about, and at the end of it all, he's sort of lamenting the fact that he spent all this time on this money, on this education. And his wife, I think, was the one to remind him, but it was such a good foil to push back against. At the very least, they did that.
That's a great perspective.
Yeah, and it did a good job of outlining for him the things he knew he for sure did not believe, and then pushing him to have to defend his own beliefs. Which all of that I think ended up being a better education than if he'd just gone along with Liberty's, their status quo theology, which is mostly garbage. But
and sadly, I mean, he's probably a minority in that. Most of them probably are to get their degree so they can get that job and basically regurgitate.
Never have to change.
Yeah. Now Todd's enough of a contrarian that he relished that role to some degree. It was fun for him. So not everyone does, but
when I first started doing this work, and I knew that God was calling me to reach out to this community with love and be a mother to them, I kept saying to God, I was very evangelical. I knew how to pray, but I kept saying, God, don't let me lead anyone astray. Like, that's the big thing. Yeah. And somebody would reach out and I would love them. I would tell them they're wonderful the way they are. I'd really, encourage them and speak life to them. And then I'd say, God, don't let me lead anyone astray. And it's like God was just smiling and would just send me another person, send me more people. And finally, it occurred to me that was never the instruction, never the warning. The warning was, you better love people well.
Yeah.
And so the question became to me, help me love well. Help me love these people well. And that changes everything. But that's what the church is really called to. That's what humans are called to, is to love well. And when we're so busy about not leading anybody astray, what that is let me get the orthodoxy right. Let me be right. Let me show people how I'm right. That's really what that comes down to. Instead of let me show them your love, which is much bigger than all of us.
So is that, so what's the origin then of Mama Bears then? Talk about that if you would.
So Linda Robertson lost her son because they did the church thing with him when he came out. And he ended up with very risky behavior and he ended up dying of a drug overdose. Tragic story, tragic. And Linda, devastated, began some online group for people that were in the same or could be in the same situation. And it was small and wonderful. And I was put in as an admin, and another woman, Carol, was put in as an admin. But it grew and grew. And so I said, I had just started FreedHearts. I said, how about if I take the moms who are getting further along in the journey and you stay with the newbie moms, which is where your heart is. And so that's what we did. And around the same time, there was another group that started that Sarah became part of. But it grew because we were all Mama Bears. And Mama Bears, that, term goes back to PFLAG, which was in the 60s, was it? Started, or 70s? We're all Mama Bears. Good God, get somebody coming at my child, I'm going to be a Mama Bear. And so that's been a generic term for a lot of us who are just vitally protective of our children, and by extension, this community that's being horribly abused by church. So, there are a lot of us, and we will continue because the attacks continue. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I was just curious. That's my wife, by the way, would get on me if I didn't mention that she just loves you to death. So she was so excited. She's like, tell her I love her. Okay, so she loves you.
I love her too.
We had our little church is only a couple years old, and the first year that we were actually before we even started as a church, we wanted to get involved with organizations like this and go to events. And the first one we did, my wife and my daughter and some other folks went with, free mom hug shirts and went with such a sense of naivete, just wanted to be nice, right. And came away just simultaneously super encouraged and devastated. Yeah. Just like it was a beautiful experience. And then they were just dumbfounded by the stories. Yeah. Like, because it never in a billion years would occur to my wife to abandon any of her kids ever. Exactly. For any reason ever. Yeah. And to hear story after story after story of people who somehow managed to do this, I don't know. It's inhuman. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I can't even, I tear up even thinking about it. Yeah. My personal experience with this, with my friends who have had children come out, is I've watched them be amazing moms and dads. Yeah. So that's at least encouraging. I haven't seen this except for in one extended family member who, actually not, a friend of a friend, but long story. That story is what you hear more often is they cut her off, and they're so afraid that she's going to go to hell. Right. That I guess they can associate with her. I don't understand. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, how do you? Anyway, so I'm thankful that organizations exist. I'm telling you, he has to be. What the hell have you done with this message of love that I gave you? It's appalling. And grace and acceptance and all this stuff. It is heartbreaking. Yeah. But at the same time, so that makes me all the more passionate that we need organizations like this. Yeah, and FreedHearts is separate from Free Mom Hugs. That's right. So FreedHearts is your organization, correct? Yeah, and we have given out tons of free hugs at lots of events, and have we've had the button for a long time about free mom hugs, free dad hugs. But we mostly what we're doing is really loving people and educating people, like returning them to themselves. We've started now where we have these 21-day beloved adventures. I have my books, I have my podcast, I have my blog with 300 blog posts on it. The podcast is going to be 100, I think, around Christmas episodes. Wow. So nice. We've really been working diligently on that. And then now, and I've got 4 books on the topic, as you read. And then we're now on our 3rd beloved adventure. It's a 21-day beloved adventure, which has been really cool. The first one is on returning to yourself, like changing your inner voice. And the second one is for Mama Bears to really get their mojo back after being so slammed by the church. How do they function now? And really finding themselves in an empowering way. And then this one that's coming up is on dysfunction, on beyond dysfunction, the 21-day journey beyond dysfunction. And, because these are dysfunctional families that are so pliant with the church, so pliable in the church that they'll reject their children. This is all dysfunction. Yeah. And so for this community to be able to identify it and recover from it and move past it is really, really important. To recognize gaslighting, to recognize, red herrings that are meant to distract them from what's really going on. Codependence, all of those things we talk about in this course, because people need to know how much they're loved and how good they are as they are. It's huge. So that was That's amazing. No, I love it. I love it all. I think if the church would actually, and I speak of the church as though it's an entity.
Right,
I realize
right.
it's not. There's nothing monolithic about it. But if the people inside of those churches if they could be made aware, if they would actually listen to the stories of people who are really, really, man, they're in harm's way.
Yes.
And that's what I can't get through these folks. This is not an ideological discussion.
Yes.
This is a real life or death issue for many, many people.
Right.
Yeah.
And the things that you do don't just harm them emotionally. It pushes them towards, like you said in one example, risky behavior sometimes.
Yeah.
Pushes them towards thoughts of suicide and self-harm.
Yeah.
The church's stance on this is killing people.
It's killing people.
Yeah.
We had a situation when the kids were in high school. We homeschooled most of the way, but in the end, they were in high school. In the last 2 years that the youngest ones were there were 3 suicides in their school in 1 year. And I remember just losing my shit over this, thinking, oh my God, like to go and find your child hanging in a closet. I cannot think of anything worse. And it raised my level. Annie had come out, but I had not talked to anybody at church yet. So this was like brand new in my thinking. And this was like a warning to me, to say, I took it as a warning to say, don't ever, ever let this happen to your child. Mm-hmm. And not that I'm not saying parents can prevent it, but do whatever you can. You don't know what people are going through. You don't know what your children are going through.
Yeah.
And so it made me on high alert for remaining connected, loving well, not driving somebody over the breaking point. But churches and their families drive people over the breaking point constantly. Yeah. It's unconscionable.
It is. I know. I agree. That was exactly the word that was rolling through my head. It's unconscionable. Yeah. The amount of, I just don't know. It drives me crazy that we've gotten here. And what's sad is that even when sometimes these things are pointed out to folks, there's a level of apathy sometimes that doesn't see. I do love the fact that when, people that I know, when this does begin to affect them personally, I've seen them respond well. It's sad to me that it has to affect them personally before they respond well.
Right.
I'm thankful for the second part. I'm sad that it sometimes takes that. Yeah. Well, it wasn't until my kid came out that I actually started to think about these things.
Yes.
And maybe, again, I know we're pushing against the tide here and railing against the status quo, but Christianity is a countercultural thing anyway, isn't it? Aren't we supposed?
When it's done right,
isn't Jesus the guy who's
right? When
it's done right, aren't we supposed to be pushing against the prevailing culture and saying no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead, we waste our energy getting pissed off at Starbucks because they don't put crosses on their cups or something.
It's not enough that we have zero persecution in this country. We have to invent public some. Companies make their cups suit us. The hell with anybody that just is not Christian, because you should make these cups for Christians. Yeah.
Yeah. God help them if they ever came out with like a, I don't know, Diwali cup or something like that. Just like, hey, no, we boycott. Right. No, we won't stand for it. But I was writing about this not too long ago, and that was one of the things that was occurring to me. Is like, we're the least persecuted church in human history.
Absolutely.
I mean, seriously, we don't have a clue.
And so we're persecuting. And so the church is persecuting.
And so we just invent things to be pissed off about because I feel like we need to. But
What's John? I was just saying, isn't that just our history though? I mean, it seems like every step of the way Christianity steps in, persecutes against who's ever they're pushing out towards the margins, and then sits there and whines about how much they're being persecuted. Right. I mean, you have the pilgrims leaving persecution, right? Coming to a new country to persecute the people already there in the name of their God.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of move on forward, continually doing this.
It sounds as much like a human thing than anything else. And, but
primitive behavior.
So it is and that's weird because we're supposed to be, somehow evolved, and yet somehow, we're using the lizard part of our brain way too often, I think. So,
and many people are not. Many people are so over it, and they have shaken the dust off their feet and are coming from a different place. And I am hopeful for those people. I'm hopeful for the emergent church, the deconstructed church, the reconstructing,
right.
And for people who are over church, I'm very hopeful about all those people, because they're going to be dragging the non-affirming church with them, kicking and screaming.
Or what they'll decide is that I'm coming closer and closer to the conclusion that whatever church looks like in, say, 20 years, 30 years, it's just not going to resemble anything that we've come to know as church. I think we're going to pitch it. I had a friend of mine who said, essentially, she's like, the church just needs to die so that whatever the next iteration of this, whatever we want to call this thing called faith, whatever it looks like, can actually emerge. Because whatever, this thing we've been doing for the last, I guess, a couple hundred years in particular is just not working well.
Right.
Hey, I'm curious. I haven't had a chance to see your TED Talk. What was the topic of your TED Talk?
Well, I talked about this and how my daughter. It's really
awesome.
worth. Let me say, it's really worth watching. I know I'm the one who did it, but it really touches the heart of the issue. I hope people will watch it. But it was our daughter coming out and realizing what we were up against in the church, and realizing that we were being told that we had a choice between God and our daughter, which is a fool's choice. It's the height of arrogance to say that's the choice. What we realized is the choice was between our church and our daughter. And that's an easy choice. When you see that that's what the choice is, it's easy to choose your daughter. Only a psychopath would not. But
amen.
Yeah, but they frame it as it's God that you're rejecting if you embrace your daughter, which is where people get so tripped up. So anyway, that the talk is about that and how we moved forward since then, and what we've done, how we've reached the marginalized, and we continue to reach the marginalized and love them with the love we're here, all of us, to bestow on each other. That's what we're on earth for. It went smashingly well.
Good. Well, I'm gonna look it up as soon as I'm done here and watch it.
People were just fantastic, and in the audience, it was like 5,000 people or 7,000 people, I forget, and it was just so moving. I loved doing that. Man,
that's amazing. So do you get a chance then to go out and speak other places? Are you at events and things like that? Yeah, I've done a lot of speaking, and I went to Australia on 2 different speaking tours for a month long each. I've traveled all over, the country and spoken. And then COVID hit, and so all that was pulled back. And I kind of assumed that I would begin speaking again when that was over, but we really started doing these courses. It was such good timing because they really needed to be done. I have so much content to convey, and I want to leave it all on the field. I want to get it out there for people. And so these courses are an outstanding way to be able to let people imbibe the true good news of the astoundingly good news of how loving and worthy we are. And we keep them really affordable so that, because I always think of the 14-year-old who has no money but needs help, and I can have tears thinking about that person who is so marginalized and isolated. So we keep everything very accessible. And if somebody can't afford, the lowest price, they just write and I give it to them for free, because I just really love, I've got a lot more love to give before it's over. I think you get to a point in your life, I don't know, where you start thinking, what do I really want to accomplish before I'm not here anymore? And it's to love as fully as I can, as broadly and deeply as I can. And that's been really satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the end of the day, what else is there, right? I mean, that's the one thing that we're going through the Gospel of John as a church right now. And I've asked my congregation, just count how many times in the Gospel of John we are told to love.
Yeah.
It's almost as though Jesus thought that was important. It's almost as though, we just went through our final one yesterday, and I'm like, God, how many times Jesus says, a new commandment I give you, love one another as I've loved you. This is how will they know that you're my disciples? By how you love each other. And so there's this underlying theme that if we would ever just fully embrace that, we wouldn't even be having some of these conversations, I don't think. We would have decided that love trumps ideology any day of the week.
Well, and sadly, what they will add, right? They add to that, even to that phrase that you just said, they will come at you and say, well, yeah, but at this point, Jesus was talking to believers.
Yeah.
So he's telling you to love your fellow believers. It's like, no, he's not.
Yeah.
No, he's not.
Even if he were, you're not. Those key people are fellow believers.
So yeah, you're not
okay. Even if he were, but he's not. What good is it to love your own only?
Yeah, because then we get to decide who's a real believer then, right?
And they do.
That's always a dicey little game, isn't it? Well, I realize, I know you say you're a Christian, but I get to decide by your actions that you're not. Well, then I get to decide by your lack of love that you're not.
Exactly.
So how about we just go round and round with that little circle, right?
Yeah, just turn the tables on them. That's what Jesus would do.
Yeah, and he would, and in a very Jesus-y way, he would do it.
Exactly.
And so I think we should, what kind of snark would Jesus use? Let's come up with a new phrase. Hey, I was curious. Where did you go to seminary? Because you mentioned your seminary was one where you learned to critically think.
Yeah, Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I think at the beginning I said Presbyterian. I only know how to spell it. I know nothing else about it. But it was marvelous, and I realized that is.
I can't even spell it, so.
And it means, do you know what Presbyterian means? Old man. It does. It means old man.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that seems to ring true.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. That's not. Some of my most progressive friends, quote unquote progressive, I'm using air quotes, people, but some of my most progressive friends are Presbyterians, which I always find weird because they're rooted in Calvinism, except they're kind of not. I don't know. It depends on which branch of Presbyterian you're talking about. But one of the only other churches in my city that's affirming openly is a Presbyterian church. And pastor is a super great guy. And so we've gone round and round about Calvin because, I'll throw down with the best of them over Calvin. And he likes to come to his defense. And I'm like, well, I guess we can agree to disagree on that. But I am aware of that seminary in Austin. I love Austin, by the way.
Austin. It's a marvelous place. But it is in Texas, which is going through some really bad things right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we're smack dab in the middle of it. So
outlawing abortion at every level, which whatever you think, getting paid if you turn in somebody who had an abortion. It's just,
well, and what's weird to me is I talk to my friends who are farther on the libertarian spectrum, right? And I'm like, doesn't that bother you at least? Yeah. Don't you see that this is just another infringement on individual liberty? Yeah. And for some reason, man, they still don't, they say, yeah, but, and so I'm like, now the argument's over. So,
well, and then this whole, pro-life idea, right? That they're definitely not pro anyone else, after birth. And then these people make decisions that disagree, they're in contradiction to their faith. These people no longer matter. But I was like, I thought you were pro-life.
Oh no, they're pro-birth.
You're pro-birth.
Yeah, you're pro-birth.
As soon as you're born, they want nothing to do with helping a single mother.
God forbid your child comes out as gay, because you're definitely not going to affirm that. Right. You're definitely not going to count that as an okay thing, because just call it what it is. You're pro-birth. You're not pro-life. You're pro-death penalty for sure across the board. Yeah. You're pro-war. You're you're not pro-life. We can point at over and over again versions of life that you're not pro.
But Austin Presbyterian was a great seminary for me. It really opened my eyes completely, and I went in as a disillusioned evangelical, and I came out as a real progressive. And it was astonishing for me. I couldn't believe it. And Jesus came with me. Jesus is like unprecedented as a human being. Nobody can find fault with Jesus. Everybody, looks at Jesus and says, yeah, that's an amazing person one way or another. But it's all the stuff that's been done.
Yeah, we've messed it up. Where I love that, talking like Gandhi used to say, like, Jesus, I love your Jesus very much. Your Christians, not so much. It's like,
yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like when we talked to him at Meta, and he says, if you guys would just do what Jesus told you to do, I wouldn't. His name online is the Friendly Atheist, and he's like, if you would just do what Jesus says to do, I'd have a lot less to complain about you guys. If you would just follow the Jesus that you say you follow, which you don't.
Yeah. Nobody complains about Jesus. It's all the stuff, and that's why we can go down rabbit holes at any point. But that's why people grab Paul so much, because Paul gives you a lot more to make rules out of. But Paul was navigating a fledgling group of people through occupied land, through the Roman territory. He was trying to keep a low profile so people wouldn't be killed. But he thought Jesus was coming in his lifetime. He thought any minute. Okay, so Paul was wrong. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And so
wait, hold up. Wait a minute.
I know. He was wrong. And yet
now I need one of those sound effects to say heresy.
You did it really well right there. You did it really well.
Paul was wrong. Well, and Paul, we were talking to, I think it was Douglas Campbell, but there's a part in his book. I'm not sure if you've ever read he's probably the world's foremost scholar on Paul. I mean, N.T. Wright, nah. Douglas Campbell has taken this to a whole new level, right? But one of the things that he quotes is essentially and it wasn't his. And I can't remember the guy who said it now. But anyway, it was Paul's theology of the status quo.
Yeah,
and it stemmed from the fact that Paul believed the return of Christ was imminent, and so therefore, don't go out and get married.
Yeah,
like don't go out and remain slaves. This is all going to not matter very soon. So let's just get through this, because Christ might be back tomorrow. Right. And then, as the can got kicked further and further down the road, at some point, now you have to deal with the fact that 20 years later, Jesus still hasn't come back, and people have literally put their weddings on hold, and people who have, but by that same token, 2,000 years later, we're pulling those texts out and we're saying, listen, Paul's fine with slavery.
Right.
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't.
In the context of what he expected to happen, it didn't make sense to go have a slave revolt, when Christ was going to make all of that irrelevant very soon. So,
right. And he said there's no more slave and free man. There's no more,
right. No more Jew or Gentile.
No more male or female, transgender opponents. Take note.
Exactly. Yeah. Take notes. Hey, look, it's almost as though all those binary definitions Paul says are useless.
Yeah, it's almost as if.
We don't need those anymore.
That's right.
Almost as if.
That's right.
And so, maybe that's one of those things that we should take. We love to take Paul very seriously when he agrees with us.
Right.
Well, yeah, we everything Jesus says is all in parable, and we can take it figuratively, and we don't have, but when Paul speaks, it's all literal. Everything he has said literally means what it says, and it literally means what it means to us today.
Except when it doesn't. Except when we don't agree.
Yeah, except when it does.
Right, exactly, yeah.
I love it. I love it.
I've always wondered if you could go back in time and just walk up to Paul and say, hey, those letters you wrote to specific churches at a specific time? Do you know that we now believe that everything you wrote was actually as if God had took over your hand and wrote it for you? I think he'd like, what a load of bullshit that is. That's not what happened.
Exactly.
I think Paul gets a bad rap in a lot of ways. I mean, I have a lot of issues with Paul, but at the same time, one of the things I think we don't allow for Paul is we don't allow that there was any growth. We think that the Paul that on the road to Damascus is the same exact Paul at the end.
Right.
And he had no growth, no learning. He didn't do anything.
Well, and he said, you understand that children obey your parents. He was stating the Roman household code. But I say to you, parents, don't exasperate your children. Well, which one's quoted in church every time?
Yeah.
you know?
Obey.
Or wives, obey your husbands, which is part of the Roman household code he was repeating. But then I say to you, husbands, love your wives. So he was so the very things that we attribute to Paul as affirming are the very things he was upending with his follow-up comment, his secondary comment.
Yeah.
That again doesn't suit the purposes of a patriarchal church. Right. So it picks and chooses.
And that's a very, when we talk to Doug, you need to read, I think you'd like Doug a lot. First of all, he's from New Zealand, so his accent is brilliant. But he would say that's part of that whole Socratic method that Paul was very adept at using. And so us not knowing what to do with that, we flatten out everything Paul ever says. And we make it all of equal value. And we don't allow for the dialogue that's actually taking place in Paul's letters, where Paul's actually, he's actually arguing against the things that it sounds like he's affirming.
Exactly.
But to me, it's fascinating, but that requires a level of education, at least from the guy leading the church who should be able to say, hey, let's dig a little deeper here. Let's not take everything at face value. There might be something more to this than simply fortifying the biases we already have that exist.
And you said a flattening, and the word platitude means a flat place.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what a platitude is, just flattening the conversation.
Yeah.
It's not giving any light or truth. So, and we got plenty of platitudes.
And therefore no shade, right? No nuance, no, it's all just squashed down. And so that's how we get where we are, right? Yeah. That's how we can pull those 6 or 7 clobber passages out. To answer John's question from earlier, there are people doing good, serious academic work on this. Yeah. Sadly, they're just mostly not in the pulpits of evangelical churches. Yeah. They are in seminaries, and they are writing. Sometimes I need them to come out and write this stuff at a more accessible level. Yeah. Because sometimes they're writing to peers, and they're writing they're writing very scholarly works, and they don't filter down into the mainstream. It'll be another 20 years before we see some of this stuff in the mainstream, but there's very, very good work being done. And actually, if you would poll, I think most get out of the evangelical world and get into the real, substantive seminary world, and there's a lot more progressive thought there that would agree with a lot more with what you're saying, Susan.
I would even venture to say, if you were to be able to poll churchgoers, even within the evangelical world, and with the knowledge that they aren't going to be called out. Because I think a lot of people go to a church either because their parents went there or because this is the best church in their area or the only church in their area. But I think if you were to poll them without any kind of knowledge of it getting out, right, that they what they truly believe, I think you'd find out there's a shocking amount of people who really have no problem with this, right? But the problem is, and this is where I think this is where we, using this platform and using your platform, this is where we need to give them permission almost and say, hey, but you do need to speak up. Right. You do need to be loud. You do need to use your voice. And it's going to get you in a little bit of trouble with your church, with the leadership of your church, with your friends. You're going to lose friends. You're going to lose family members. But isn't it worth it? And the end of, I mean, if you really truly in your heart believe that God loves everybody, isn't it worth it to lose the people who I don't know if they're really worth holding on to anyway.
Well, I found that I was so afraid. My first answer back when God said, you're going to be doing this work was, but I'm going to lose all my friends.
Right.
And now I look back and I lost most of the friends at the time. But now I've got more friends, new friends, people that I can be me with. Well, that's a total upgrade. And I think of it as going through your closet brutally, especially for women that probably change out their clothes more than men generally. But, you pull out a bunch of stuff and you think you'll really miss it. But then you get new stuff and you're like, I don't miss that old stuff at all.
Right.
And, those relationships fit the time that you were in. But if you're becoming a new person, then
they don't
fit. You need new people around you. And then they're the lifetime friends at that point.
Well, and something John said that struck me was interesting is that I think he's right. I think if you remove that sense that I'm supposed to be against this, right?
Yeah.
If you just take that away and ask people to honestly tell you how they feel, I think most of the time they're like, they're either ambivalent or they're more affirming than they would think. But there's that pressure and that dissonance that says, okay, I don't care who people love who you want to love, right?
And why should you? Yeah.
And why should you? Because it's none of your fucking business. But at the same time, there's this pressure that comes to bear that says, but I'm supposed to be against this.
Right.
Because Jesus told me I'm supposed to. By the way, listeners, if you want to look up everything Jesus ever had to say about homosexuality, don't bother, because he never brought it up. Even once. So everything that Jesus ever said about this issue has been summed up in one blank sentence. I actually put that in my book. It's a quote, a line, and a quote. Yeah. There you go. So for something that the evangelical world has decided is such a linchpin issue, for Jesus to have not seemed to have given a damn about it is very telling.
Well, it just boils down to their connection to family values. We need to hold on to whatever the hell that is. Their version of family values, which so many layers of bullshit in that I don't even want to get into it because we don't have that kind of time.
No. But, I know. You're right, though.
I even started this conversation about, I think that if you were to ask them without any kind of, potential of getting in trouble, and that's also in quotes, that they would probably be more affirming. But that also in some ways is rather insidious too. Just quietly sit by and say, well, if I had it my way, we wouldn't be so mean to these people. Well,
yeah.
In a lot of ways, I still say that the people who are openly, very loudly against the LGBTQ plus community are a little easier to deal with because you know where they stand.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's still at the end of the day, we still need to step up. We still need to make our voices heard. We still need to say that what's going on is absolutely wrong. And, thankfully there are places where you can go online to find out if there's a church in your area that is affirming. That's something that we do. Back when I was going to church, that didn't exist. I would just have to go and ask.
It didn't need to.
Right. Thankfully and luckily for us in this era, there's places where you can go online and say, okay, where is an affirming church in my community that I can go to and I can connect with. And that I think is a huge step in the right direction. And hopefully we can, and that is a place where you can get, connect with people who have a better understanding of what's going on. And it allows you to open up your voice and speak out, and then hopefully encourages you to then reach out to other people.
And I dissuade people from thinking they're going to stay in a non-affirming church and change it from within, because the leadership will not let it happen until the leadership changes their hearts or people. They're not going to let it happen. You may think you're making progress, but they're just humoring you.
Yeah, and then to stick around is to sometimes just be complicit in what they're doing.
Yeah,
and I'm over that. I'm not going to sit idly by and watch you harm people.
Right.
Even if I think on some level I'm pushing for some change, it's just not. I agree with you. I would dissuade as well.
Yeah,
I've told the story a few times on the podcast that I have some really good friends who came to me several years ago, and my friend's wife, she was asking, they're a lesbian couple, and they were like, well, I don't really care about church, I don't really care about God, but my wife really does, and she misses that part of her life. And would your church be a place? And this was before I had my own church. I was just on staff at a different church, and I had to be really honest. She's like, would this be a safe place for us? And as I said what I just told you. I'm like, yeah, safe-ish, which is to say, no, I guess not. Mm-hmm. Sadly, that it would not be. Nobody would be overtly
right
in your face. You wouldn't be rejected, neither would you be affirmed.
Right.
And so it was they opted not to come because I couldn't guarantee that they were, that was a place where and I wouldn't lie and say, oh no, we're totally fine. No, we're we'd found that soft, squishy middle place of tolerance, which is one of my least favorite words in the world, because who the hell wants to be tolerated?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. No one puts that in their wedding vows, do they? I promise to love, honor, and tolerate you.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I would go back to one of our first parts of our conversation even today. It was like, don't do me any favors, right? Like I promised to put up with you for the next 50, 60 years. Well, thanks. Hey, quick question before we have to let you go, because I could talk to you forever, by the way. So, this has been so good, and I appreciate your voice so much.
Absolutely.
But I did want to know if you had anything upcoming, any projects in the works, anything that we should be on the lookout for.
Our dysfunction course, 21-day beloved adventure beyond dysfunction is coming up, and it's going to be really good. I think if people can get plugged into the courses we have, they're very affordable, and they're designed to keep taking them. And next year in the spring, we're also planning to do a Harry Potter adventure. So it'll be a 25-day, because it'll be 25th anniversary of the first book. 25-day.
Okay, you just got John's full attention. You saw his face go, whoa.
Yeah. And
because he's looking more and more like Dumbledore every day.
Well, okay. So, side note, it didn't happen, but for Halloween, I put the vote out. Do I dress up as Dumbledore or Gandalf? Those are the two I was going for. I ended up, I didn't have the time to put either one together, but I would have been extremely happy with either one.
You look a little bit more like Christopher Lee. Maybe you could be Saruman.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. You'd be the evil one, I guess.
I could be that. Okay. So we'll put links to the courses in the show notes, and really encourage people to check that out. I think.
Yeah, the podcast. You can listen to the podcast. And
but what is the name of the podcast? I need to go look
at FreedHearts.org. It's FreedHearts is the name of the podcast.
Okay. Awesome.
It's all at FreedHearts.org.
I need to check that out. But I don't listen to enough podcasts, John. It's becoming clear.
Well, I was listening to a lot until we started our own, and I was like, I don't have time anymore. Right?
Yeah, who's got the time? I already listened to the best one. What? No, I'm just kidding. So the podcast, obviously, all the books are available wherever you can buy books, on Amazon, I'm assuming. And
I do have a question about the courses. So you're talking about the one that's coming up. Can you still do the previous ones? Are they still available online?
Yeah, they're all.
Okay.
In a set, you just get it, and you do it. It'll feed to you for 21 days. Okay. They're really powerful.
Just want to make sure our listeners know that it's not like a one and done.
Exactly.
Like if you didn't get into it, you don't get to do it. You can do it later.
Yeah, and people leave comments, and I answer them. As long as I'm still not overwhelmed by numbers of comments, I'm able to answer them. So it's a good connecting point too.
Okay. Well, like we said, we'll link to all that in our show notes. We'll make sure and put all that out for our folks, and encourage them all to check it out and go watch the TED Talk. I'm gonna do that here in about 5 minutes. I'm gonna go check that out. Awesome. Man, it's been so good to have you on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
And more than that, I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
I love what you're putting out. That's critically important stuff. So
thank you. Thank you for this work too, that you're giving voice to people who really need to be delivering this message of love.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is the very least we can do, right, John? Nah, I guess we could do less, but no, we could just. Have you ever watched that show, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee?
Yeah.
I love that
Jerry
show.
Seinfeld. I can't remember who it was that said it, but Jerry says something about, I guess one of those expressions he doesn't like, because that's the least I could do. And, I guess he called the guy up and he hung up on him and he called him later and goes, no, that was the least I could do. Which was like literally nothing.
Nothing.
Now So see, even in the exiting, John, I can rabbit trail and pull something completely.
Yeah, for sure. We could this could go on another 40 minutes with nothing really.
No content.
One of our endings should just be Eric going and like cutting us off. His sentence going in the interest of time.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.